The rain fell in sharp, steady sheets against the old office windows, blurring the city skyline into streaks of silver and gray. Inside, Emily sat frozen at her desk, her trembling hands clutching the letter that might destroy everything she had built over the last 15 years. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her vision blurring, not from the rain outside, but from the tears she was holding back. The email from HR had been short, brutally cold. Your position is under review due to restructuring. Please await further notice. Her heart pounded in disbelief. After years of dedication, endless overtime, and sacrificing her weekends for deadlines, this was how it might all end. If only someone had told her that a single act of kindness from her childhood, one simple lunch shared with a hungry classmate, would one day circle back to her in the most unexpected way, she might have believed in miracles long before this moment. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of doing good even when no one's watching, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Tales. Your support helps us spread these true-to-heart stories further. Emily was known for her resilience. She had worked her way up from an entry-level assistant to a respected team leader in one of Chicago's biggest marketing firms. But the corporate world had grown colder over the years, and the warmth of personal loyalty had long been replaced by profit margins and digital efficiency. She wasn't sure how she'd survive another layoff, especially after losing her husband 3 years earlier. She had promised herself and her daughter, Claire, that she'd never let their lives fall apart again. But as she stared at the flickering computer screen, all she could feel was dread creeping in like an icy tide. Her mind drifted back to the days when life was simpler, when kindness didn't need justification, and hearts weren't hardened by the weight of adulthood. She was 12 again, sitting in her middle school cafeteria with a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a juice box her mom had lovingly packed. The school was small, the students friendly but distant, and Emily had always been the kind of girl who noticed when someone was left behind. That day, a new boy had been sitting at the far end of the cafeteria table, hunched over with his head down. His clothes were worn, the sleeves of his shirt too short, and there was something about the way he stared at the empty tray before him that tugged at her heart. She had seen him before, in class, quiet and reserved, always sitting in the back. His name was Jacob. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter and chatter, but around him, there was silence. Emily hesitated for a moment, then, without thinking twice, picked up her tray and sat across from him. She smiled shyly and offered half of her sandwich. He looked up, startled, eyes wide with embarrassment. But when she pushed the sandwich toward him with a quiet, "You can have it," something in his expression softened. That day, Jacob ate half of Emily's lunch, and though he barely spoke, he whispered a small "thank you" before leaving. From that day on, they became quiet friends, the kind who didn't need to say much to understand each other. Sometimes, she'd share her lunch again, sometimes, he'd bring her an extra eraser or help her carry her books home. Emily never knew much about his family, only that things weren't easy for him. But she never saw him as poor. She saw him as someone trying to survive in a world that wasn't always kind. Years passed, and as life often does, it pulled them in different directions. Emily's family moved to another city after her father's job transfer, and she lost touch with Jacob completely. She often wondered what happened to him, if he'd managed to rise above those struggles, if he'd found his own place in the world. Then adulthood came, and with it, a cascade of responsibilities that left little room for nostalgia. Now, decades later, sitting in her dimly lit office, she was once again that same girl, scared, uncertain, but holding on to a flicker of hope that maybe, somehow, things would turn out okay. The following week was torture. Rumors spread throughout the office that upper management had brought in a new executive director, a man known for ruthless decisions, one who wasn't afraid to cut departments that didn't meet his expectations. Everyone was anxious. Emily tried to stay calm, but her stomach twisted in knots every time her phone buzzed with a new email notification. Then came the meeting invite. It was scheduled for Friday morning. The subject line read simply, "Department Review, Attendance Required." She sat in the glass-walled conference room with a dozen other employees, the hum of tension palpable in the air. When the door opened, every head turned toward the tall man in a navy suit walking in. His posture was firm, his expression unreadable. As he began speaking, Emily froze. There was something achingly familiar about his voice. Deep, steady, with a faint warmth beneath the authority. He introduced himself as Jacob Hayes, the company's new executive director. For a moment, the room spun. Emily blinked hard, certain her mind was playing tricks. Could it really be him, the boy she had once shared her lunch with? His features had matured, his hair now touched with faint streaks of gray, but his eyes, those same gentle, watchful eyes, were unmistakable. She felt a rush of disbelief, followed by a wave of nervousness. Jacob's speech was calm and professional. He spoke about efficiency, modernization, and the company's need for adaptation. When his gaze briefly met hers, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition, but he quickly looked away, continuing the presentation. The meeting ended with mixed feelings. Many feared what his leadership would bring. Emily, though, was lost in thought. Could it be that fate had brought them together again after all these years? She didn't know whether to be hopeful or terrified. 2 days later, her phone rang. It was HR, calling her to meet with the new director in person. Her heart pounded as she walked toward his office, every step echoing like thunder in her chest. When she entered, Jacob was standing by the window, looking out over the city. He turned slowly, and this time, there was no mistaking it, the soft smile that spread across his face was filled with recognition. "Emily Carter," he said quietly, his tone a mix of surprise and warmth. "It's been a long time." She tried to speak, but her voice trembled. You remember me?" He nodded. "How could I forget? You were the first person who ever showed me kindness when I needed it most." He gestured for her to sit, his expression turning thoughtful. "I've thought about that day more times than I can count. I was just a scared kid, hungry and embarrassed. You didn't judge me. You just shared what you had." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "I can't believe you remember that after all these years." Jacob smiled softly. "Some moments never fade." He took a deep breath, then sat across from her. "I know you've been worried about the layoffs. I've reviewed every department, every name. When I saw yours on the list, I stopped. You've given so much to this company, Emily. I couldn't let your job go, not after everything you've done here, and not after what you once did for me." The word struck her like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. She tried to protest, to thank him, but emotion overwhelmed her. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy but full of something beautiful, an unspoken reminder that kindness never truly disappears, it only waits for the right time to return. From that day on, everything changed. Jacob became not just her boss, but an unexpected friend. He often sought her advice, trusted her with major projects, and together they built a stronger, more compassionate workplace culture. Emily became known not just for her work ethic, but for her empathy, a quality Jacob made sure to celebrate in every team meeting. Months later, during the company's annual meeting, Jacob shared the story publicly. He told the audience about a young girl who once shared her lunch with a poor boy in school, not knowing that small act would someday come back to change both their lives. He ended the speech by saying, "Kindness is the most powerful investment we can ever make. You may not see the return today, or even tomorrow, but one day, it will come back when you least expect it." The entire room erupted in applause, and Emily's eyes shimmered with quiet pride. She realized then that the smallest choices often leave the biggest marks, not just on others, but on life itself. Years later, when Emily finally retired, Jacob made sure her farewell celebration was one to remember. He stood beside her, raising a toast to her decades of service, saying, if every workplace had one Emily, the world would need fewer bosses and more leaders. She smiled through tears, realizing that the boy she once helped had become the man who reminded her that no act of goodness ever truly goes unnoticed. As she drove home that evening, the sun setting over the city skyline, Emily thought about how fragile life could be, and how powerful a simple act of compassion truly was. The circle of kindness had completed itself, beautifully and unexpectedly. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Tales. Your small act of support helps us continue sharing these real, soul-stirring stories with the world. Comment below and tell us, do you believe that kindness always finds its way back? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And as Emily learned on that rainy day, sometimes the meal you share today becomes the miracle that saves you tomorrow.